Hello everyone and welcome to Total Quilter Monthly for September 2022. My name is Mark Garetz and I'm a National Floriani educator, and this month we're going to be going over Basic Appli Quilt Blocks. Now before we get started, a couple of housekeeping things. One is that, we've covered Appli Quilt blocks in the past quite extensively actually, but the program has changed a little bit in the way the blocks are displayed, and so we're going to go over them again just so everybody's up to date. And you might be new to Appli Quilt blocks. I invite you to go and check out the previous things we've done with Appli Quilt blocks. You want to look on the club site in the 2018 area. You want to look at September and February specifically, so go back and check those out for a more comprehensive overview. And this is going to be an update of that for the way the screen looks, so don't get confused by those older videos. Everything looks pretty much the same, but when we get into it I'll highlight the differences. The other thing is that today we're going to be doing a variety of mouse clicks and keyboard entries, and I apologize that you won't be able to see me press keys on my keyboard, but I'm going to tell you when I do it. Basically, we're going to be using the Enter key or the Return key on your keyboard. And then as far as mouse clicks go, we're going to be doing two different kinds of mouse clicks. One will be a normal left click. If I want you to just do a normal left click, I'm simply going to say click. And if I want you to do a right click, then I will specifically say right click. And then also we're going to be doing mouse movements with a drag, and you'll see how that works when we get there. Okay, so let's get into it. The first thing we want to do is get our screen set up, or our workspace set up. And we want, when we're making Appli Quilt blocks, to be showing our grid. That's really helpful in creating the blocks. And we also want to have our grid settings in a specific set of modes. The first thing we want to do is come up to our upper ruler and right click to show some of our grid settings. The first thing you want to make sure is that Show Grid is on, and that Snap to Grid is on. And we want to go down here to Grid Settings. Now how you set this up is more of a personal preference. It also kind of depends on what size block you want to make. Now today we're going to make a 6" by 6" block, and I have my horizontal and vertical grid spacing, that's the dotted lines out here, set up to 1/4 inch apart, which is good. But I have these set to grid major at every 8. So the grid major are these darker purple lines, and since I want to do a 6" block, every 8 does my 2" by 2", which is going to make it be on the wrong boundaries for that, because what I want, and my grid always starts at 0 and goes positive this way and negative this way, and I want to be able to see a line at 3 plus and 3 minus to give us our 6, and right now you can see they're at 4. So to move them so I see them at 3, I'm going to change this to 4. So instead of every 2 inches of a grid major, I'm going to get every inch, because 4 times 1/4 is 1 inch. So I'm going to say okay. That's going to make the grid a little bit busier, but that's okay, because now we've got these nice vertical lines on our 3s, which is what we want. So that completes the grid setup. Now we're going to go ahead and create an Appli Quilt block. Now when we work with Appli Quilt blocks, all of the icons we want for Appli Quilting are right in this area right here, and they're all this purple color. So when you see these purple color icons, these are our Appli Quilt icons. To create an Appli Quilt block, we start with this icon right here, which is called Create Appli Quilt Block, and we just simply click it. And you can see that my cursor is a crosshair, and in the bottom right side of it you can see a little rectangle. That is there to let me know that the first step I need to do is create my outside rectangle or square for my quilt block. And I'm going to do that by clicking and dragging a square. And you can see this is where my major grid lines come in, because I want to make it 6 by 6. So I'm going to come up here to -3. And since I have snap to grid turned on, I don't have to be particularly precise about where I get this. As long as I get close to this intersection here, I will be in the right place. It'll snap to that grid point. So I'm going to click and drag down to the lower right, and I'm going to go down to -3 and +3. So -3 on the vertical, +3 on the horizontal. And I'm going to let off the mouse, and that's going to create my block. Now it's a little bit hard to see here because of the major grid lines, but trust me, it's there. And now what the program wants me to do is draw intersecting lines. So the way we create an Appli Quilt block is we take this basic rectangle that we just created here, and we're going to draw lines across it in various patterns to bisect up this block to make sub-blocks or our eventual blocks. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a simple quilt square. What we're going to do is make a 4-square triangle here. And I'm going to come up to this corner and I'm going to click, and then I'm going to drag. Now I'm not holding down the mouse key. I just did a click and I'm just moving the mouse. So I'm not really dragging down to this lower corner. And then I'm going to click again to enter that point, and you can see it draws in that line. And now I'm going to press enter on the keyboard, and I apologize you can't see me doing this, but I'm pressing enter, and that tells the software that I'm done with that particular line. Now I'm going to enter another line. I'm going to bisect it the other way. So I'm going to come up here to this upper right corner, click, move the mouse down to my lower left corner, and click. And you can see it draws that one. And that's all the lines I'm going to use for this basic block. And I'm going to press enter one more time to put that line into position, finish up that line. And to finish the block, what I'm going to do is right click on my mouse. So I'm going to, doesn't matter where my cursor is, I moved it over just a little bit, but I'm going to right click, and that is going to create this block here. And you can see that what I've got now is my 6 by 6 inch block, and it's been bisected into 4 triangles. And this is your basic Appli Quilt block. And now what we need to do is we need to fill these areas with various colors and also put in our Appli Quilt stitches across here to tack these block pieces down to our base fabric, if that's the way we want to create our block. There's lots of different things you can do with Appli Quilt blocks, but the basic is that you would use Appli Quilt stitches to tack these stitches down. So that's what we're going to demonstrate today. Next month we'll go over some advanced Appli Quilt techniques. Now what's different about this and the previous videos and the previous versions of the software is when you created this initial block, this part was grayed in. So it was filled out with gray. And that made it hard to see the underlying grid lines, and it also made it harder to see these black dotted lines to show you where your intersecting lines are. So they've eliminated that gray fill and just made it transparent, which is very nice for us because it makes it easier. There was a way to make it transparent earlier, which was to come over here and click this block line mode, but that made it an extra step, and now you don't have to do that. So it's transparent. So now what we need to do is start putting in our stitches and put in our fill colors for our blocks. So we can do it in either sequence. We can either put in our fills or we can put in our stitches. So let's go ahead and put in our stitches first. Now to do that, we need to select our stitch lines, which are these intersecting lines here in the middle. And when we want to select a piece of an Appli Quilt block, we do not use this normal select tool over here. Instead, what we use is this special Appli Quilt object selection tool right here. And it says in the highlight here, select block area, but it actually also works to select the lines. So I'm going to click that tool, and now I can come and select a line if I point to it. So I'm going to select this first line, and you can see now it's highlighted in blue to show that I've got it selected. And I can start putting stitches on this line. Now normally in an Appli Quilt block, you use the same stitches throughout the block to tack your pieces of fabric down. You don't have to, but that gives you a more consistent look. If you want something custom though, you don't have to do that. But we're going to do that. So we could go ahead and apply stitches to this line. Then we can come back and repeat the process to this line. But since we're going to make them both the same, what we're going to do is just apply them all together. So to do that, I'm going to point at my second line, hold down the Control key on my keyboard, and click that second line to select it. Now the sequence in which you do that's very important. So you're going to hold down Control on your keyboard, then you're going to click the mouse, let off the mouse, and then let off Control. So that sequence is a very important way to do it. If you mess those up or you get them out of sequence, it's not going to work right. So now I've got them both selected, and the way I'm going to apply stitches to this is the way we apply stitches to any lines in the program, and that is to come down here to our stitch conversion tools. So I could do this to a motif stitch, I could convert it to a run stitch, a steel stitch, or a steel combination run stitch. I'm going to use a motif, which is what we typically use in Appli Quilting. So I'm going to click that, and it's going to put in the default cross stitch pattern here that we normally use for Appli Quilts, but it's using the standard pattern in the motif, which is fine. But there's a special set of Appli Quilt motifs that if you click this upper drop down here in the properties box, you'll see we have Appli Quilt binding motif stitches here. And you'll notice that Appli Quilt 0 is the same stitch. So we could select that one, or we could select any other of these stitches, or you could use any motif stitch as well. So what I'm going to do is I am going to select Appli Quilt 30 here, a little decorative stitch. I could leave the pattern size alone, I could leave the stitch length alone. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at 10 and click apply, and that's going to put in that pattern here. I'm going to turn on 3D so we can see our stitches a little bit better. And now what we need to do is come in and assign our fabrics to these areas. Now we can put real fabrics in here, or we can just put colors. So I'll show you both of those techniques. We're going to start with just colors. And you can see I've got red and blue already in here, and we'll just go ahead and use those. And what we're going to do is come back, and so we've already got our Appli Quilt selection tool selected, but I'm going to click it again just to make sure. And let's go ahead and do these side triangles. So we'll go ahead and make them the same color. So I'm going to click over here, and you can see I've got this one selected now. I'm going to click over here, and again I'm going to do that Control click. So I'm pressing Control on the keyboard, clicking my mouse, and letting off Control. Now I've got both of these sides selected, and let's make those blue by clicking this color here in our color palette. Now when I click it, it asks me what I want to apply that color to, and it's giving me fabric color. So I'm going to click that, and it's going to apply that here as this fabric color. I'm going to repeat the process for these two, except I'm going to choose a different color. So I'm going to click here, I'm going to Control click up here, and now I'm going to use the red color, which it actually says is deep pink, but it looks red to me. I'm going to choose fabric color, and there we go. If I click off it back into normal select mode, this stitching here is red, which we might want to leave it. It's making it a little hard to see it over the red of the block color. So let's go ahead and show you how to change that. Come back up here into Appli Quilt object selection mode and click that line, and hold down Control and click that line, so I've got these stitches selected. Now I can select any color I want from my color palette. So let's just scroll along here and we'll pick something that we can see. Let's pick this yellow color here just for the heck of it. And now it's asking me what I want to assign that to, and I'm going to assign it to the line paths color. Okay, now if I click off of that, you can see it assigned that yellow color. Now I said I would show you how to assign actual fabrics to these quilt block pieces. And the way we do that is, once again, we want to make sure we're in Appli Quilt object selection mode. And if we want to assign a fabric to these, let's just do the reds. So I'm going to click on the top red triangle, and I'm going to hold down my Control key on the keyboard and click the bottom one. So now I've got both of these red triangles selected. If I come over here to my properties box, you'll see I have a fabric label with 3 dots and a button. So if I go ahead and click that, it brings up my fabric library. Now I've got fabrics that I have added in here, so I've got this red fabric in here, so I can go ahead and use that. You can use any of the pre-built-in fabrics. You can also, by clicking this Add button, add in pictures of your own fabrics. So to do that, you would click Add, and let's just see what it does. And it lets you navigate to anywhere you want to bring in a picture. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click this red fabric right here, and I'm going to say OK. And you can see now it's replaced that with this red fabric instead of the red solid color here. This is just mainly so you can see what your quilt block, and if you use Quilt Builder, your actual quilt is going to end up looking like. It doesn't really make any difference to the actual file, because it's up to you to pick the right fabric to use. So that wraps up our lesson on Total Quilter Basic Appli Quilt Blocks. I want to thank you for watching and invite you to come back next month where we'll go into some advanced Appli Quilt block techniques.